All right, so welcome to the deep dive today. We're going to be taking a look at some pretty interesting stuff. We're going to talk about South Korea and the U.S.
Okay.
and their cooperation in the shipbuilding industry.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, so it seems like the U.S. needs some help with building some ships,
Right.
and they've actually specifically asked South Korea for help.
Huh. Now, why would that be, I wonder?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're going to look into today is
Yeah.
what's the U.S. angle here?
Yeah.
What are they hoping to get out of this? And what's in it for South Korea?
Right.
Because it seems like there's some pretty interesting dynamics at play. So to set the scene a little bit, there have been some recent meetings between some high-level officials in both countries. On the South Korean side, we've got An Duk-jin.
Okay.
He's the Minister of Trade, Industry, and Energy. And he's met with his counterpart in the U.S., Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been talking about shipbuilding. And it seems like it was a pretty big part of their talks.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. So this shows you that both countries think that this is a pretty important issue.
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating here is that the U.S. really needs very specific ships.
Mm.
And it seems like they think that South Korea, the best place to get them.
Right. So it's not just any old ships.
Right.
It's certain types of ships that they need.
Exactly, yeah.
So to look into that in more detail, both countries have agreed to form these, what they call task forces.
Okay.
So you can think of these as like teams of experts from both sides that are going to get together and hammer out the details of this collaboration.
Okay, so like a joint effort to figure out... That's
Exactly. They're going to
yeah.
figure out all the ins and outs of how this is actually going to work. And they're actually bringing in multiple government departments from both countries as well to make sure that they've got all the bases covered.
Okay, so a pretty comprehensive approach.
Yeah. So it sounds like they're really serious about this.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. But here's where it gets a little interesting for me is, you know, when you think about the U.S. and shipbuilding, I tend to think about, you know, big warships and stuff.
Sure, yeah.
Aircraft carriers, that sort of thing. But the U.S. is actually asking South Korea for things like LNG tankers
Oh, okay.
and icebreakers. And so that, to me, kind of suggests that the U.S. has some different objectives in mind.
Yeah. What would you say those might be?
Well, I was thinking that when you think about LNG tankers, they're mainly used for shipping natural gas.
Right.
And so
Right.
that suggests to me that maybe the U.S. is looking to increase their own energy independence.
Ah, I see.
And then with the icebreakers, you know, those are used for breaking through ice,
Yep.
obviously. But that suggests that they're interested in, like, Arctic navigation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that seems like a pretty strategically important area, particularly these days.
Right.
So it seems to me like they're kind of thinking a little more broadly than just military stuff.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the next question then is, you know, if South Korean shipyards are already really busy, how are they going to handle these additional requests?
Well, you're right. South Korean shipyards are already booked up for the next 3 to 4 years, so that's a lot of ships.
That's a lot of ships, yeah. How do they even decide which ones to prioritize?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting because this is where South Korea has some serious leverage. Imagine you're the U.S. and you need these very specific types of ships. You can't really shop around. So South Korea is in a really good position.
Yeah, like they've got the U.S. over a barrel a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So they can kind of
Yeah.
dictate the terms a little bit more.
So they're holding all the cards, basically.
Very much, yeah.
Okay, so that's what they mean by leverage. That makes sense. Now, I did read that South Korean officials have some concerns about possible U.S. tariffs
Oh, yeah.
on these ships that they'd be building for the U.S. So what's that all about?
Well, tariffs are basically taxes on imported goods. So South Korea is worried that these tariffs could make their ships a lot more expensive for the U.S. to buy. And that could hurt the deal.
Right, yeah, no one wants to pay extra taxes
Exactly.
if you can avoid it. So what are they doing about that?
Well, they're pushing for exemptions from these tariffs, or at the very least to be treated the same as other countries that export ships to the U.S.
So they want a level playing field.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds to me like, you know, the U.S. needs these ships. South Korea has the ability to build them.
Mm-hmm.
But they've also got some concerns of their own. So it seems like it's kind of a delicate dance between the two countries.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, the U.S. needs those ships. But South Korea sees a really valuable opportunity here, not only to secure a really valuable customer,
Right.
but also to strengthen its partnership with. a global superpower.
Yeah, yeah.
But like you said, they do need to find some common ground on things like tariffs.
Yeah, because otherwise it could all fall apart. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you wouldn't necessarily think about shipbuilding as being like a key issue in international relations.
Right.
But it seems like it really is.
It is, yeah. It's a really good example of how something as specific as shipbuilding can become really central to international relations.
Yeah, yeah. So we've talked about how the U.S. is looking to South Korea to help them with their shipbuilding needs. And we've talked about how South Korea has a lot of leverage in these negotiations. So I guess the next question is, what does this all mean in the long run?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It'll be really interesting to see how this collaboration might actually reshape the shipbuilding industry.
Yeah.
But it also raises some bigger questions as well.
Like what?
Well, for instance, how might this impact global shipping routes or energy markets even? Things like that.
That's a good point. Yeah, so it really makes you wonder, what the long-term consequences of this partnership could be.
Yeah.
Feels like we're just at the beginning of this story, really.
It does, doesn't it?